Umberto Lenzi's Man from the Deep River was the first venture into the cannibal genre for the Italian horror film. The film puts in place some of the conventions of the genre going forward, but is also of a somewhat surprisingly high standard. I am the Italian Horror Guy, and this is the Italian Horror Guy podcast. So I guess you'd say that I revisited this film for the first time in quite a while. It's quite fascinating to think that, and I'll obviously discuss this as the podcast goes on, but it's quite fascinating to think that it's probably only about 70 minutes into this film, if you didn't otherwise know already, that it becomes clear that this actually is a cannibal film. And it's in that way that I think it's clear why it's a bit of an ambiguous part of the cycle, right? In fact, I think you'd say it's not really an official part of the cycle, which I think started probably with Deodato's Jungle Holocaust, I think it's called, in 1977. Because I think, for a start, pretty much everything about cannibal films from the late 70s and mainly early 80s in the Italian horror genre, I think there's what would you say? There's like the purported sort of moralistic standpoint of the film is that it's white people sort of coming into these primitive lands, and it's meant to be they're meant to be a sort of social commentary on the way that polite society sort of dismisses other cultures and conventions. But without fail, I think with much fail, I think pretty much every one of the cannibal films in this cycle, I think, fails to actually put forth that in an effective way, because the actions that they're portraying are frankly just evil. And in order to say, well, that's just the way they are, or something, then what would that be in political terms? The soft bigotry of low expectations. So this film's quite different to that, and as I say, I think that's why it didn't necessarily take off for quite a while, or at least it is the most unique of the cannibal films of this era, I think. It's somewhat confounding, a lot of the stuff that's happening. And I'll make the point straight off the bat for anyone who has seen The Last Samurai and Man from the Deep River. I feel like The Last Samurai stole this and then made a Hollywood blockbuster out of it, and then never had to pay any royalties. So the whole premise of the film, I know it's not an uncommon one in film and literature, but the whole premise of the film is pretty much identical, with slightly different backstories, but white man goes into primitive culture. Primitive culture is suspicious of white man. White man eventually comes to know and love the culture, and then eventually comes to lead it. And if that's not enough for you, consider the scene where I think his name's Brad or Bradley, Ivan Rasimov's character. Consider the scene after he runs away and then gets caught on the rocks next to the river. He gets surrounded, and now think back to when they capture Tom Cruise or Nathan Algren in The Last Samurai. He gets surrounded by about 4 or 5 guys holding spears. Main character says, "He's mine." Walks up to him. He's on the ground. Is about to finish him off with a blow. White man picks up spear, jams it through stomach of guy who said he's mine. Now, you might have lost which of the two movies I was talking about then. And that's because I was talking about both of them. The scene is basically identical. So unless the two have the same source material, of which I don't think either of them have claimed clearly what their source material is, then I think that The Last Samurai stole stuff from this movie. So I'll probably be whinging about that as we go on. And funnily enough, I love The Last Samurai, but I also love Man from the Deep River, as absurd as it is from time to time. So I'll get into some of the specifics of the film. So right off the bat, it's got that weird like adventure sort of travel log type music. Hang on, I'm gonna confirm his name because I don't want to call him Rasimov. Yeah, John Bradley. That's an extraordinarily boring name for our main character. So John Bradley is in, I think, Thailand. I think the movie sort of happens. Well, it's not just based. I think it's actually shot sort of in Burma and Thailand. There's those messages. There's pieces of writing at the start of the movie that sort of explain the situation. And I think it's Burma and Thailand. And he's sort of just doing stuff. And I'm assured on Wikipedia that he's there like taking some photographs or something, like maybe some kind of journalist, but none of that's ever clear. He just seems to be there. And he's at that boxing bout, and there's a lot of stuff in this movie that I think is almost exceptional, but probably at best it's just good. So, and that's largely because of the on-the-nose nature of some of it. So I'm quite a fan of this opening section of the film being there to emphasize this sort of warring tribal mentality, right? So he goes and spectates two people in a fight, and then later in the film he ends up in fights. We see those very uncomfortable, like a snake versus I suppose ferret type fights as the film goes on, and you know it establishes the battle of it all, but also at that fight where he's got that attractive woman with him who's really bored by the fight and she wants to go somewhere, and he just sort of ignores her, and then we never see her again. And then there's that guy following him who then decides to stab him, or to try to stab him at the bar a bit later. Now, what's really strange about this is there's never any explanation for what that is. It's just some guy who doesn't seem to like him, who follows him from the boxing ring to a bar. So I'll make mention of it here. I haven't actually completely settled on which three Lenzi films I'm going to do. Obviously, I've got Man from the Deep River. I think I might just do Eaten Alive and Cannibal Ferox to keep the cannibal theme. But whilst on the topic, I'll just mention Cannibal Ferox, which is obviously of a significantly lower standard than this film, right? The thing about Cannibal Ferox is it also has that stupid backstory with that guy at the start. Remember the hideous music? It's so like bullshit New York cop 80s type music. But that at least links to the nonsensical or the non-interesting story in Cannibal Ferox, right? Like that guy knows Giovanni Lombardo Radice at least. But in this, it's like, who is this guy that's following Bradley or John? But nonetheless, this is still a significantly better film than Cannibal Ferox. And, you know, I think people, if they hear the words Umberto Lenzi cannibal film in the same sentence, they're probably largely immediately like, oh, that hack. And look, you can make that argument. I think it's probably fair to say that Lenzi probably to some degree was a bit of a gun for hire, and he would sort of do whatever was popular. But that's not the case for this film. So this music, this weird Love Boat type music that sort of reappears a number of times throughout the film, often in situations where John's sort of doing some sightseeing. it's not so much that it's a break away from the cannibal genre so much as it is that it hadn't been established yet. And, you know, it actually reminds me in some ways of Mondo Cane, for anyone who's seen that. It's this sort of like, oh, look, we're exploring the world, right? And that's largely what he's doing, or what it feels like he's doing. You know, he escapes these dangerous people, and then he's on a train taking pictures, and, you know, then he sort of hides from that train cop. But, like, all the stuff that's happening in the early part of the film is... Look, put it this way. I think if there was a bit of extra length and a little bit of extra context for John Bradley's character, then this film would probably be on the verge of great. And maybe a little bit less frolicking. But we'll get to that. As the film goes on, we've had a context, like it's been contextualized with this sort of dangerous thing with the boxing and the guy trying to stab him. And then he gets on that little, I don't know what you call it, tuk-tuk type thing, to get to the river. And there's that guy who he's sort of driving it all over the road, and there's that car behind that are really annoyed and try to get around him, and then they eventually go off the road. I don't know what the point of this scene is. Maybe just a sense of excitement or something. And then when he gets to the river, there's the ominous warning from the man who's selling him the canoe or whatever, or lending him the canoe. You know, don't go too far down the river. All that stuff. You know, it's fine, but I guess I wish that... Look, he's quite clearly presented as not from this area, right? So I think there's an extent to which they want to depict the real civilized world as a hostile place, like sort of in a similar way to the uncivilized world is also hostile, to try to say we're not so different. But by never being in London or wherever he's from, you know, most of the people watching this film aren't probably particularly familiar with Thailand either. So it already feels like a rather away from what we're used to type of place. So I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't quite set up the idea of John Bradley being dissatisfied in his, you know, modern London type mindset life to properly give justification for why he comes to love the people so much and the place. And obviously, you know, Mimi Lay, she sort of speaks for herself, but outside of that, like, no one's particularly nice to him. They're quite hostile and they think he's a fish and stuff. But anyway, where are we? Look, I think the trip down the river, and I sort of love this as a concept, right? It's almost like the, you know, early part of a zombie film or something, where you're like, we're just getting a little bit too far away from comfort and there's an impending sense of doom. But the characters are not particularly aware of it. And, you know, John Bradley hasn't been particularly concerned. He hasn't really taken anything seriously. And even the guide says that they should go back, or that he's never come this far down the river before. And then, you know, we'll wait till tomorrow. And then, see, I just think the dialogue probably does a little bit too much heavy lifting in this film. So, you know, John's all, London's 6,000 miles away from here. And that's fine. But, you know, I think it's just a little bit too easy. So, you know, he talks about the fog back home, and whatnot, but also how you can lose your way in the fog, right? Which is like sort of ironic, isn't it? Because they're losing their way currently. And is it a complacency in John? I don't know. So he wakes up the next day and the guy's dead, and it's not that clear why John isn't dead, but he's just lying in the boat. I guess the guy got out of the boat for some reason and they killed him. And then he gets captured by the cannibals. Well, actually, not really the cannibals. Now that I think about it, I'm not totally sure that there's any depiction of cannibalism from this particular tribe. So there's a bit of a sort of good v bad dichotomy in this film. I think it's the Kuru who appear later and start eating people. One person in particular, that adds the theme of cannibalism to the film. And I just wonder, right, like this idea of a cannibal film, if just say the cannibal cycle had never come about, would this film be thought of as a cannibal film? I don't think it would be, because I think implicit in the cycle, the vast majority of the films in the cycle of cannibal films anyway, were cannibal films in nature. That is to say, they would always go to a place where it's felt as though cannibalism is practiced. Whereas, now that I think about it, it's only, as I say, 70 minutes into the film where we get cannibalism. It's only from one of the tribes, and it almost presents that tribe as barbaric. I mean, it does present that tribe as barbaric, but barbaric even when compared to the tribe that we come to know and love, in theory. So he's treated pretty badly, right? He gets sort of tied up in the big net, and kids sort of, I can't remember, I feel like they're whacking him with sticks, and it's sort of funny, in a sense, because, look, I'm not sure that the film justifies exactly why they think he's a fish. I know that he says in one of his sort of diary-like voiceovers that they must think I'm a fish because I was wearing the wetsuit, but these people aren't stupid. In fact, if anything, they should be more aware of this kind of thing, given that they live exclusively out there. Fish don't just take off their scales, right? And by this time, he's no longer wearing his fish suit. He's clearly just a man with different coloured skin. And I think there's something a little bit... This happens in Cannibal Holocaust as well, where Robert Kerman is all, they'd never seen a white man before. This sort of idea that if tribes see a white man, that they're like, oh, what's this? Whereas if you remember in Cannibal Holocaust as well, the two different tribes, one of them sort of, you'd say, brownish, much like in this film, and one of them's very, very dark-skinned. So within their little limited part of the world, the people within that have very different coloured skin, which I might point out seems unbelievably unrealistic because evolution doesn't really work that way. But if their own skin colour contrasts that much, I don't see why they would be shocked to see a slightly whiter version of themselves. But anyway, let's not get bogged down on that. We get introduced to the barbarism, right, of these characters. And the thing is, this movie feels like it suffers from multiple personality syndrome. I don't remember watching too many movies that throw you up and down. Like, there are times where this seems like some kind of softcore pornography, but with almost no sleaze. Just like with people frolicking and being really happy. And then, like, 2 minutes later, they'll be decapitating a monkey for real. And we're like, well, what the wow? What am I meant to do with this? And look, there's a certain genius in that that is sort of previewed at the start of the films with that dialogue or that writing that goes over the screen, talking about how this was filmed on location and with real tribes people, and that the practices that are depicted might seem unrealistic, but this is how these people actually live. And also might it seem barbaric, and that we aren't making a comment either way on that, but we are just depicting what really happens, blah, blah, blah. It's amazing. I think Lindsay did a lot of that in his career. Well, here's some horrible things that people do, but they do it, so I'm going to make a movie about it. And that means I'm an okay person. But I'm all for it. I enjoy his films. But, nonetheless, it is a little bit questionable. So they bring out a couple of people. I don't know if they're from the tribe or if they're like from the Kurus or something, and they cut their tongues off and then kill them. And he's like, you murderers! And he's sort of yelling for a while. Again, it's sort of odd, like this feels very much like it's done as a I don't know, like a warning to him, or like, look at how barbaric we are, don't mess with us. But it's like, well, there's one of him and unlimited of them, and he's tied in a net, and they all have weapons, and he has his swimsuit. So there's not really a lot that he's going to be able to do here. But nonetheless, they like to display their power to him. So fair enough. The tribe leader guy, played by Pipop Papinho, who I don't otherwise know other than his cool name, with the voiceover, with the subtitles, indicates that he thinks, he refers to him as a fish man. So I don't know exactly what to... So, right, there's where I think this suffers in relation to other cannibal films, perhaps, but it also might be a good thing, I can't quite work out, is that because it's filmed very much on location, it feels like all the budget was put into the location feeling very, very good, but almost movie set-like. Whereas whilst there's a lot of on-location stuff that happens in other cannibal movies, it feels like they just sort of stumbled across it and like, let's film something here. So, and I know that's not exactly how it was, and the other problem is when a few of the people in it are actual actors, and this guy, Pipinho, the tribe leader, it's very clear that he's an actual actor. There's just something about his performance, and it's a little bit disconcerting. And I feel like one of the features of the cannibal film is that pretty much everyone in them, with the exception of a few actors, are clearly amateur actors, and in some cases not even that. They're just standing there. So it doesn't have the graininess and that really that real discomfort that like the cannibal holocausts of the world have, and cannibal ferox for that matter. Because, and see, look, it's probably not a flaw, because I mean that's the aim of this film. It wants you to feel quite comfortable, and after a while, and like to the point that it's only the very specific acts of barbarism that make you feel uncomfortable. Like when they're not cutting people's tongues out, and when they're not, killing people. In between, it just feels like, they're just building shit. They're just building huts and whatever. And to be honest, when that stuff's not happening, it actually feels so much like The Last Samurai, where we're like, oh yeah, he's walking around looking at these people do things, and then eventually he's like, oh yeah, I think I like this. So there's an important aspect of this It's sort of like creating Italian cannibal film lore, right? We see the use quite often in future cannibal films of the little arrows, and they'll shoot people and then they'll just die, and you're like, oh, well, why did they die? And it's because they're laced with python venom. I think they're pythons. They're bastard-looking things anyway. And it actually shows them extracting the venom from the mouth of the python. This isn't the kind of stuff I think you could get away with from an OH&S perspective 50 years on as we are now. There's some astonishing things that happen in this movie from that sense. That's quite clearly genuine. There's some guy actually grabbing this psycho python from the back of the neck and getting its venom onto that little, I don't even know what you'd call it, and then they put it on the arrows, and then I'm not really sure we see much of the arrows, but it's like they were saying, well, this will be for future use in future cannibal films, so great. There's, I think, a really cool moment where he's yelling out, I can't remember if he's still in the net, I don't think he is, but he says, I'm a human being like you, I'm a man, not a fish. Now, that's very humorous, but I also think it speaks to the intricacy, I think, of the sort of moral philosophy of this film, if it has such a thing. That the assumption, it might even be directed in some ways at us, the viewer, because before I go on to say this, there's not anything about the way John Bradley is presented that suggests he is hostile towards these people. He seems to like Thailand a lot, and he doesn't seem to have that sort of white arrogance about him that you might be expected to be depicted in a film, say, in 2022. He's just sort of there enjoying his time in a foreign land, right? So, but anyway, if the assumption is that we are looking down upon them, it's interesting the way they treat him as subhuman, right? And see, within that quote, so I'm a human being like you, right? And the assumption, at least when we go up to the cannibal Holocaust era, is that these very civilized people, because they generally start in New York or somewhere like that, civilized people versus the uncivilized, horrible cannibal primitive people. Whereas the thing is, this film doesn't really make much of an effort, or doesn't try at all, I think, to try to depict these people as if people think of them as primitive or less than human. But nonetheless, I feel like there might be a bit of an assumption being made about the audience, and that's probably true. They are walking around with spears, and there are people that are eating them and stuff, so that seems a little bit primitive to me in 1972, but nonetheless, I digress. Don't call me a racist. So it shows that to them, they're the civilized ones and he's the uncivilized one, right? For whatever reason they think that, I guess because he's a big giant fish. So Mariah, or Mimi Lay, who I believe isn't anymore, but she's still alive, was in a few of these types of movies. She was in Jungle Holocaust, which I have to talk about one day. I reckon I'll do a Deodato trilogy. Well, I'll make it into a trilogy myself in the coming weeks, because the scene where she gets eaten in Jungle Holocaust is one of the most extraordinary scenes that I've ever seen in a movie, with that fucking theme that plays while they're doing it. I remember that blew me away the first time I ever saw it. But anyway, so I don't know how you become a sort of cannibal film damsel, but that's what she became as a result of this film. She was also apparently a TV presenter at some point, so there you go. So Mimi Lay is just sort of being attractive and eyeing off John, at one point I think she comes to give him food, and then he like eats it and then bites her and stuff, and it's a bit how you going. I'm not really sure what that's about. Maybe it's sort of depicting this idea that he's becoming a little bit cannibalistic and crazy or something. I don't know. But there's always this sort of soap operatic type music that plays when she comes into the room or to wherever he is, and it's sort of hilarious because it's like half the time in this movie it actually feels like Lindsay is trying to make like a romance film. In fact, I'm going to go further and say I think this is a romance film more so than it's a cannibal film, and that really feels bizarre. But having watched it last night and coming away from it, I think that was more, I'm thinking more about how sad it is that Mariah dies and she's not going to be around to take care of their child than I am about the cannibals and stuff. And that doesn't happen, let's be honest, when you watch most cannibal films. So, that happens, and he seems to be getting more used to the situation, but obviously he's still a captive. So a helicopter comes and he tries to get the attention, and then they beat him up and they're about to kill him, and then Mariah comes and says, no, you can't kill him. And I think from that point she takes care of him, and then it becomes really Last Samurai like, right? Like even some of the way that the way some of the cinematography works. He's sort of slowly walking through the village, looking around, thinking about how we can get used to these people and how their simple ways are really nice and stuff. He's watching them, build huts and make weapons, I suppose. And so at some point we see Mariah, like on one of his little walks, we see Mariah sort of splashing around in the water. She's naked, and there's a couple of other attractive women who are also naked. And at this point, we're just like, what's going on here? This is just voyeurism for the sake of it, right? But no problems there. But Mariah gets very, very embarrassed when she sees John and covers herself up. And see, I think this is one of my issues with this film. It's probably coming across like I don't like it, but I actually really like it. But I think one of my issues with this aspect of the film is like, I think they make it clear enough that Mariah is interested in John, to the point that I think a couple of the characters directly say it to each other at one point. I don't think we need all of it, right? I don't think we need Mariah to be embarrassed about him seeing her, because they seem to walk around naked most of the time anyway, so it doesn't even make sense why she would be embarrassed. But they do that because why not? We start hearing voiceovers of them talking about their customs and stuff, again, just like The Last Samurai. And there's a bit of a process, I suppose, throughout the film where they're still showing that, he's not completely comfortable with the scenario, and then he does still ultimately want to leave. So there's that woman, I'm not sure if she's someone's mother, but she explains to him at one point that she wants to, that she was, like, I think captured or something when she was a girl, and that the cannibals don't know, or the tribe, should I say, don't know that she's actually not originally one of them. So, but she just seems to be stuck there. But she's sort of feeding him information and stuff. But, eventually they capture her doing something, and they cut off her hand, So there's still a lot of ordinary stuff that seems to be happening. So it does take a while, and he eventually becomes one of them by, saving one of their lives. But also there's that scene where they're like building a a hut and something falls on that guy. And I must say, like, it sort of happens in the background. It's very it looks quite realistic. Like, it just looks really effective. Not that it's really that important, but one of the tribesmen gets crushed by something and then he dies. So that sucks. And John does his best to help him, but it's too late. And this is part of the process, right? An important part of the process of him joining the tribe and being one of them. So, his body gets burnt. And see, look, I think this is the thing about the film that makes it so multiple personality. It's not that there's nice things happening and then there's bad things happening so much. It's that the tone of the movie generally is nice. It's not so much a roller coaster as it is. So, all right. So I hadn't watched it for a few years, and my memory of it was the really uncomfortable things, like him being spun around and having arrows shot at him, you know, the real animal killings that happen in the film, that kind of stuff. Now, that's still there, but I think the thing that makes it so uncomfortable, because it's nowhere near as uncomfortable to watch as a number of other cannibal films, although it is still uncomfortable. I think the thing about it is its tone is actually, for the most part, very nice. So you actually feel quite heartwarmed a lot of the time. And then out of nowhere, something horrific will happen. So it's really hard to sort of monitor your emotions or to control your emotions as the film goes on. Because at a certain point, you're just like, oh, you know, I hope that John and Mariah end up together. And you don't even know why you care, but you do, right? So, speaking of horrible things happening, after the man is burnt, the next day, his wife is naked and lying on the ground and just getting, well, I wouldn't say raped, having sex with a number of the tribesmen. And again, this is the Lenzi exploitation, the aspect of him as an exploitator of a director coming into it. It's like, oh, how do I get away with putting awful things in my film? I know, I'll put a little disclaimer at the start that says, this is what happens in these places. I'm just depicting that. So this scene feels like it goes on for fucking ever, but it at least seems like a couple of minutes, so it starts happening without any explanation. Then John's looking at it from a distance, and then, like, there's the women that are sort of standing there watching it happen. They seem upset, but they're also just accepting of the custom, supposedly. But it's only after forever of this happening that the helpful woman explains to John what the process is. And it's like, maybe you could have explained that to us at the start. Not that it makes it any more pleasant, but without an explanation, it's just like, what the fuck is going on here? I guess we can perhaps deduce, sort of, but yeah, it's very, very uncomfortable. So it's sort of like the film saying, oh, here, what we're doing is we're depicting a different sort of culture. And just so happening to pick one that they do things that, within the context of our culture, really, well, are horrific, basically. But it's okay because that's just the way they are. So, let's make a movie about it. To be honest, that is exploitation cinema, right? So while this is happening, this is his chance to escape. And he does, or he attempts to. So he's hiding under those rocks. So this is that scene that I described earlier. Eventually they surround him and they're going to kill him, but then he kills one of them in the Last Samurai style death. I think one of the tribe's people says he's won. Which is, I think, why they can't then kill him. It's like he's had this battle with this guy, and he's now, I don't know. I think there's a strong level of respect that comes from that. respect that now earns him the right of, cooking in the sun for 3 days to see if he's, a true warrior or something. So that's the thing about this film, right? Are we depicting something that's foreign to us in order to make a movie and be interesting, or are we trying to make a movie with awful, difficult things to watch, and are we selecting this foreign culture just so we can get away with it? I suspect it's a little bit of both, but I think it's a little bit more the latter. So they tie him up and they put that head thing on him, and the helpful lady tells him, you have to survive, even the little arrows. And they shoot little arrows at him. And he's spinning around. And it's truly awful, right? It's truly awful to watch. I'm pretty sure there's fire in the room. It feels sweaty. It looks sweaty. He's got arrows in his body. And it's really, really horrible. And it's it's sort of strange, right? Because at this point, do we care about him? I feel like the film basically earns their right for us to like John purely by the fact that he's treated horribly, not necessarily by anything that he's done. But the more this stuff happens, we're well, this isn't very good. I wish that this wasn't happening to him. So, I guess he's the good guy. So obviously we want him to survive. And now we get some animal cruelty. Because why not? There's a fight to the death between a python and a ferret or something. Look, I've sort of noted here that it's because this happens sort of simultaneously. They're cutting between images of John trying to survive whilst being left in the sunlight, and then they're doing that, and then they're showing the ferret and the python, the python battle, and I guess they're representing he's the ferret, right? Because the python's I suppose, more immediately threatening creature, and the ferret's the underdog. But more importantly, within the scene, the ferret's on this little string, which is possibly, that's even more cruel, but it's possibly to show that it is the one that is being strung up. It's the one that is being contained, much like John, and that it has the fight of its life ahead of him, but it manages to kill the python. I know this sounds stupid, but this scene feels like less animal cruelty because the python dies, because snakes are bastards. I know that's absolutely stupid, but I don't care that the snake dies. Look at it. Look at the way it sits up, being a snake. So anyway, I feel like the ferret's an underdog. But then, see, the thing is, if my read on that is correct, which I suspect it wasn't, then it's then the scene needed the ferret to win. So did they have another python and ferret fight to the death, and the python won, and oh crap, now we're going to have to shoot this again? I guess this is the problem with killing animals to make your art, right? So then we get some more Love Boat music right after the fight to the death, and we're like, okay, now we feel good again. Okay, with scenes of him fitting in, eating bugs, I don't know, just helping them build things. Then they kill a monkey, because why not? It's got the same little setup as they have for when they decapitate Radice in Cannibal Ferox, and it reminds me a little bit also of the device that they put they put John in to spin him around when he's getting shot by the arrows. It sort of seems to be a Lenzie favourite. Let's let's put people's heads in traps. It's not very pleasant. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, then there's a chicken fighting scene, although I don't know if they're chickens or roosters, whatever those creatures are. I feel like they could beat me in a fight. They're fucking terrifying looking things. But I don't think we see the end of that. They're just sort of standing each other down a little bit, or staring each other down a little bit. Then there's a boy who is suffocating in a little hut. I have to say, I think this is an incredible scene. I mean, the kid acts it very, very well. I love the idea, like him standing up. So this is the thing about this film. You could read it as disrespectful, but there are moments when he calls bullshit on their rituals and stuff, right? He says black magic won't save him, right? Because they're humming or something. Whereas there's this respect, this almost, it's, what would you say? It's almost reverse racism in a sense. The negative depictions of the cannibals in, well, the fact that they are negative depictions of the cannibals in the cycle films, but that we don't really, by being so uncritical, you're like being like, oh well, it's acceptable because we don't expect any better of these primitive people type thing. Right? Whereas I think the sort of moralistic standpoint of this film is we can respect other cultures, but when people are doing horrible things, they're still doing horrible things. So, and also that let's not respect their culture to the point that that you don't save the child's life because we're achieving something by upholding their culture where they just sort of try to hum him back to life, or whatever it is that they're doing. So they believe him, and then he does the little trachea thing, I think it's called. He puts a hole in the kid's neck and he gets air that way. But I think what's so effective about this thing is that kid really feels like he's suffocating. And I know a lot of the stuff in this movie is actually real, but I'm pretty sure they didn't actually do that. And I think, I don't know, the blood and stuff, it's uncomfortable, but it's sort of a powerful scene. The little smile that he gives after it, like I've just saved his life. And I don't think he's just happy because he's going to be more accepted. I think he's, genuinely caring. So now, at this point we can begin to get a bit of a liking for John if we hadn't already. Yes. Then we get the ritual. So apparently, what happens in this culture is, in order to get a woman, she sits naked in a hut, and you put your hand in the window and fondle her, and hope that she selects you. So, look, again, with this fluctuating tone, we've had to deal with pleasantness of, oh, look at this wonderful little culture, and then animal murders, real animal murders, and then we get this bizarre scene where it's very rapey, right? They all put their hands in and they fondle her and stuff, and she doesn't seem overly comfortable with it, and quite clearly Mimile is actually doing this, and but oh yeah, this is just the ritual, so it's fine, but it's also very rapey. But then, of course, John puts his hand in and he doesn't fondle her. He caresses her and holds her hand. And then we're like, oh, isn't that nice? We're not doing rape anymore. Now we're doing sensuality. I'm like, okay, so supposedly this is meant to be a really good thing. But, she's selected him, which is great. Then we get some more Love Boat music, which is good. And he's chosen, she puts the little flower thing around his hand. And then they frolic for a while. This is the sort of the frolicking section of the film, I'd say. There's probably about 70% frolicking for 10 minutes. Mimile runs off and slowly, well, not that slowly, but undresses, and then John undresses, and then they continue to he continues to chase her, and they just do that for a while, and then he eventually catches up with her, and they have sex in some grass, and it's really like a bit over the top. It sort of feels like they're actually having sex, not necessarily in this scene, but in a couple of others, and then they kill a snake and spill its blood onto her. And then they, to make sure she's fertile, then they catch a pig in a hole, although we don't actually see them kill the pig, which is nice. I don't know if they do. We see some meat not long after. And then there's some more frolicking, and they have sex a couple more times. Mimi lays all, I love you. And then, John with or Mariah, I should say. But John with, his infinite wisdom says, I'm not sure you know what love means. Love, or whatever he says. But, they have some sex. And then they brutally kill a crocodile. And I'm like, can we just stop with this, right? Are we doing extreme corny love or real animal killings? I'm not sure my brain can take both at the same time. And that is maybe the most uncomfortable, right? Because the crocodile's doing that weird roll thing, which is apparently the crocodile solution to everything. If I'm trying to kill something, I'm gonna roll it. If I'm being slaughtered, I'm gonna roll. But it's really fucking uncomfortable, and I'm like, look. I will make this comment. On the Horror Film Science podcast, when I think I mentioned this in relation to Cannibal Holocaust. I do think there's a certain hypocrisy about getting angry about this stuff, right? You can't do that to make art. Like, okay, what can you do it for? Oh, for food. Like, okay, but these animals are going to be eaten. So here's the truth. This is the truth, even if the killings are a disgrace, even if they are unnecessary. Why do people get angry at them? Because they have to look at them. That's the reality, okay? I don't want to watch that crocodile die. I can just not watch the film. End of story. Because the truth is, we eat animals every day. It's only people who genuinely don't eat animals that have the right to be outraged by this. So good luck to those people. Eventually, Mariah gets pregnant, and John's very excited, and he says, "My little black savage." I mean, that's just straight up racism, right? I can't get around that. I can't quite believe that was just put in a film. It's hilarious, and I guess it makes sense, sort of. Its skin will be darker than his, and he'll be part of this primitive culture, I suppose. But there's just something very, very politically incorrect about that. And then they frolic again and have sex in a little hut and get powder all over themselves, which doesn't look that comfortable with all the nakedness happening. We hear some more voiceovers, and look, this is probably one of the lame things about the film, right? The constant voiceovers that are just like, how am I meant to convey what he's feeling? Let's just hear what he's feeling so we don't have to display it in any way. There's a bit of, tell not show about that. But, fine. He thinks life here is much better. He doesn't want to go back to London. Which is funny because I don't really know what's so much better about it, right? Like, every day they're fighting for survival. Most of the people that he's living with wanted to kill him 6 months ago. And some of them tried to kill him 6 months ago. So I'm pretty sure it's just Mimi Lay that makes his life better. And you know what? I'd probably agree with him. I'd probably happily risk my life to be in his situation. He teaches her about cars and buildings, to which she obviously doesn't understand, and that's very, very nice. And then we finally get some cannibal action. Thank God, this is what we all came here for. There's one of the other naked girls from earlier in the film sitting with a man, a black savage, shall we say? No, I'm just joking, guys. On a rock, and they might be eating together or something, and then some cannibals appear. They attack the guy, and he wanders off. And then they just kill the girl and eat her. And they really eat her. As in, they don't eat the actress, I presume. But this is, it's one of the more uncomfortable... look, I don't know if you guys feel this, right? But just hear me out. There's something infinitely more uncomfortable in a cannibal film watching a cannibal eat a person than if it's a zombie eating a person. I don't know exactly why that is, because it's essentially the same thing, right? It's still a person eating a person, but there's something about the way that cannibal's sitting there on the rock, just with her arm like it's a fucking chicken drumstick, just eating the flesh right off it and getting blood all over his face, that I just don't want to deal with. And also, can I make this point? Okay? This is the part that I assume, I don't know, I assume this film fails with, and basically all the other cannibal films as well. If it is a tribal practice of these tribes to eat the tribes people of their opposing tribes, would they really kill them and just eat them on the spot? Are these are the hunter-gatherers of the Kuru, I suppose. These are the ones with darker skin, so they're the enemies. They kill this woman. There's like 5 of them there. Because they found her, they must know they're near the opposing tribe, and they all just disarm themselves and start eating her. Do they not have wives and girlfriends back at their own tribe that they need to bring this food back for? Are they not going to cook her? They just start eating her, and because of their complacency, our friends, our cannibals, go and just kill them. Right? It just seems like very irresponsible behaviour. Oh yes, it's just a movie, but it's sort of like I guess it's a feature of horror films, right? That when there's killing happening, we don't really care about logic anymore. But yeah, so they get their just desserts after they've had their human desserts, and they all die. John gets possibly a little bit too much pleasure out of cutting the main one's tongue off and just chucking it on the ground. And that's the end of them. And then... what then happens? Oh yeah. Mariah starts to die. Just with no explanation. Now we're back in romance mode. And again, it's the helpful woman. That's right. That's why she gets her hand cut off, because she helps them leave. And it's like, see, this is the thing, right? The film, and maybe this is possibly the most interesting aspect of the film, the way that within all the context of what's happening, right, John still isn't completely around all of the rituals, right? He loves the place for some reason, but the process of how their tribe works means, she can't be taken away. He knows he needs to get her to a city and a hospital if she's going to survive, but he can't, because that's just not how the tribe works. So she helps them get away, get in a canoe, and then the men find her, and as a punishment they cut her hand off. Sorry, helpful woman, no hand for you. And then they're beginning to row away, but the tribesmen, they start beating some drums for some reason, and then they eventually catch them, and well, back you go. Bad luck. Then we get some, I think, really... Well, actually, one thing I need to make mention of is the elephants in the river, right? That's pretty cool, that there's just genuine real-life elephants there, and they're just sort of rowing past them. I don't have anything more to say about that. I just think it's cool. Sort of reminds me of Zombie versus Shark in Zombie Flesh Eaters. Just that we can do this stuff in Italian horror films and not think of it. So yeah, they get brought back, and he accepts it. Right, he accepts she's just going to have to die. They're sitting, at the side of the river at one point, and he's describing to Mariah all the beauty of the river. And look, the thing is, just one more criticism before I give it some praise. Mimi Lay is a shocking actor, right? Of all the people in this film, it's hard to comprehend that, well, of all the non-recognised actors, it's really hard to comprehend that she was the one that was an actor. She always has that look on her face like she's trying not to laugh all the time. Anyway, she's attractive, so who cares? She sits there going blind, or I think she's already blind, and rather beautifully, John takes the little flower out of her hair and puts it on her belly and says, "A butterfly has just landed on your belly." And I said, what the fuck is this movie? Why? Well, okay, cool. That's very pleasant, but yeah. But look, I think it's genuinely emotional, right, from this point until she dies. So they're doing a bit later. She's dying, or she's close to dying, in a hut, and they're doing some more humming stuff, and John gets in there and is like, get out. What is this? This is stupid. And then he tries to treat her, or he's just nice to her or something. Cannibals attack the village. Soon after that, a bunch of them die, including the face paint guy, who I haven't made mention of yet. But I think I'll just point out: does that guy, is his face tattooed? Or does he wake up every morning and apply that paint to his face? Probably worth mentioning. Anyway, so it's sort of sad when he dies, even though he's very unpleasant and we never not like him at one point. Now, I want to make... There's some genuinely brilliant dialogue when Mariah dies, and it's because of its subtlety, right? So we might remember the butterfly that lands on her stomach that he makes up. He says it's a white butterfly, right? It's pure, right? It's alive. When Mariah is dying, however, an actual butterfly lands near her, well, actual within the context of the movie, and John says, a butterfly's landed again. But see, it's sort of like the white fish who cried butterfly, isn't it? Because he said there was a butterfly previously, but now there really is one. But anyway, she's happy about that. She asks what colour it is, and he says, black as the night. And there's something so powerful about that, because I think there's an acceptance that she's going to die, right? Even though I'm pretty sure pretty soon after this he says she's not going to. So it's more symbolic, right? Like he fundamentally understands that she's going to die. And they have their emotional conversation. He says she's going to stay and see their child grow up. But this is sort of... Look, there's something so beautiful about the way this happens. She says, die. But because she doesn't know the language, John is assuming this is her language, and he says, what does that mean? And she says, death. Now, what I find so moving about that is that this is her process of finally being able to understand him and him being able to understand her, right? She understands the language, but it's also in her final moment, which is really, really sad, obviously. this is after. Well, she then gives birth, and they cut a goat's neck. Actually, that might be more brutal than the crocodile death. I think it's really. Okay, I'm sure that's just a ritual. We don't have to even explain it. And then she says, "The wind will carry me with you forever." And they have their hands cut by the dad together, and they're now united. And she dies. And after that, he has visions of her frolicking naked again, because it wouldn't be Man from the Deep River without some more frolicking. Also, in the process of her death, Mariah explains to him that he has to stay because he needs to take care of the people. So I think this aspect of the film is really, really effective, because ultimately, at that point, I don't think it's clear, or even clear to him, if he genuinely wants to stay, right? It's not necessarily clear, because we know he wants to be around there because of Mariah, but is this now his life? And obviously he loves Mariah so much that he trusts what she has to say. So he hangs around. And then it comes full circle, obviously. A helicopter flies over, and we don't know yet if he's going to try to get its attention. But he tells everyone to hide. And, they now have to rebuild the village. He is now the leader. So, final thoughts. As I said, it's almost great, this movie, right? I think it just needed an extra 20 minutes. Some for context of a little bit of what is this guy's life beforehand, because it sort of tries to earn the right by stealth for us to actually care about John, but I just don't think we can quite care about John, because it's just not enough. We just don't know enough about him. I think that we need to flesh out a little bit more. Like, what's the threat of the helicopter anyway, right? Like, the thing is, like, I know it's like it's society and stuff, but I don't think the helicopters ever attack them or anything. So there's a couple of helicopter scenes. There's the first one where, one of the tribesmen throws a spear at it, but it misses by about 100 meters of height. But the only danger in the helicopter is to the tribe, because John's trying to get the attention of the helicopter so he can escape. That doesn't really achieve anything. And then at this point in the film, you hide. What are they hiding from? I don't know if is the helicopter a threat, or is it just sort of more symbolic, right? It's civilization, or modern civilization, that we don't want to be part of. But nonetheless, I think what I like about this film is the process, right? The sort of strange journey. But I think it ends up in a place that I'm quite happy with. And as much as this has probably sounded like I don't like it, sometimes I get into the mood of criticism, or being critical, I should say. Excellent movie, honestly. I think it's one of the better cannibal films. That said, I'm quite happy to exclude it from the cannibal film list, because I don't think it's really a cannibal film. I think it's a love romance that has cannibalism in it, and I'm not sure you can say that about The Cycle. So I've decided just now I will be doing Eaten Alive and Cannibal Ferox in the next 2 weeks, and they aren't good cannibal films, although I do love Cannibal Ferox, even though it has no right for anyone to love it. I think Eaten Alive was first. Whichever one came first, I'll be doing that next week. I've decided just in the last 5 minutes, I want to save Spasmo, which is a fucking great movie. I want to save Spasmo for when I do a trilogy of let's say mid 70s Giallo films. and they won't necessarily be all from the same director. So I hope you have all enjoyed my thoughts on Man from the Deep River. I have enjoyed exploring this film with you. Join me next week for episode 14, where I'll talk about, well, either Cannibal Ferox or Eaten Alive. But do join me for that. Enjoy your week, guys.